So we've thought about how stakeholders lets us see business and society as going together. And by the way, thinking about stakeholders isn't separate from thinking about philanthropy and corporate social responsibility and the environment. Usually these things build together. We've talked about how thinking about stakeholders has to go along with purpose. I want to add to that two principles that oftentimes are a little counterintuitive because this standard story just can't deal with these principles. They're worth spelling out because they're really important in building these new models. The first principle I'm going to call the interconnection principle. The interconnection principles work like this. Because stakeholder interests go together over time, we need solutions to issues that satisfy multiple stakeholders simultaneously. Many years ago in the United States, Datsun, now Nissan, developed an engine. It ran on just regular gas. It was before unleaded gas. And they planted a tree for every one you test drove. They figured out a way to satisfy multiple stakeholders simultaneously. Companies need to figure out how to creating value for one stakeholder implies value creation for another. It's about win, 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 win. It's about how when you do something for customers, you also make the community greener, etc. So the second principle that's involved in this is you can't think about trade-offs. It's something I want to call the no trade-off principle. If we take the stakeholder idea seriously, we try to never trade off the interest of one stakeholder versus another, certainly not continuously over time. When you trade the interest of one group off versus another continuously over time, if you always make trade-offs in favor of shareholders versus employees, what happens? In a relatively free society, it's straightforward. Employees will use the political mechanism to have their rights enforced. If you always trade off the interest of customers over suppliers, what's going to happen? Suppliers are going to go to your competitors and help make your competitors better because you're not creating enough value for them. So the idea here is the no trade-off principle says when you make customers better off, how does that make suppliers better off? And when you make customers and suppliers better off, how does that make employees better off? And when you do that, how does that make communities better off? And when you do that, how do you make shareholders or financiers better off? And by the way, if you make customers worse off, you better understand how to improve the trade-offs. When you have to make a trade-off, the next question is, how do I improve the trade-offs for both sides? This was brought home to me listening to a CEO talk about, again, an example from the environment. This was a large chemical company. They were pretty routinely seen as being a pretty dirty company. And the CEO decides to change things. And so they announced that they are going to be committed to zero pollution. Now that's going to take time. It'll take actually generations, a big company, worldwide company. And they're going to have a pretty business-like process with milestones and this kind of thing. And the CEO, as he told the story, is going around to all the facilities telling people, here's our new approach, we mean this, we're gonna clean up our act. And the engineers at one facility came to him and said, we just can't do this. This plant and equipment's too old. This process is too dirty. We can't meet the interim standards, the interim milestones. We'll never do that. And the CEO said, well, okay, we're serious about this, so we'll have to close this plant. So the engineers walk away. 2-3 weeks happen, go by. You know what happens. The engineers come back and they say to the CEO, well, actually, it looks like a miracle. We figured out how to do it. And, so we can, it's going to work for us. You don't have to close the plant. The CEO said, well, how much is it going to cost? He's thinking, several millions of dollars, big plant. And the engineer said, actually, we're embarrassed to say, if we do it this way, we're going to save money. What's happening? Trade-off, community, that's where I would put environment in the stakeholder model, and employees. CEO says, okay, we'll make a trade-off if you can't figure it out. Community wins, employees lose. Okay? This is unacceptable to the employees. They kick into gear the only infinite resource we have, and that's what's up here. They figure out how to be creative and how to make this plant more efficient, greener, safer, cleaner, and save money. And what we find is when we allow people to exercise their creativity, we see this again and again and again. What I'd like you to think about is how do the no trade-off principles, don't look for trade-offs among stakeholders, and how do the interconnection principles see stakeholder interests as going in the same direction? How do they apply, not to the companies you know, but how do they apply to how you spend your time? Do you constantly make trade-offs, or do you look for ways for trade-offs to disappear?